You are live. All right,
Terrific.
Matthew. I just don't know that we've really been missed. I mean, we last week we only recorded one show. We haven't had Shop Talk in 2 weeks. This week we're only recording one show, but I haven't heard any sad emails from people who are just missing us. I don't think we're as loved as we think.
Yeah, that hurts. It hurts a lot.
So it's been a crazy, kind of busy week or two here. Riley's been out on vacation. This is the second week of his 2-week vacation. So that challenges us to produce the podcast and other things. So if you're wondering why we've not been doing as much live content of late, that's primarily the reason. Oh, I saw this coming, Matthew. We already have questions on here from people wondering where your beard went.
Yeah, it went away. It went away. So
It's gone is the answer.
Yeah,
Sorry.
wasn't my happiest thing to do over the weekend, but you got to make family happy sometimes. So
He's throwing someone under the bus, I sense. Today we're going to be discussing 5 things the gun industry has changed its mind about. That sounds like improper grammar, but we also change our minds about what qualifies as good grammar, I think. So, we're looking at things that 10 years ago maybe they were semi-debated, 20 years ago it was super debated, and maybe 30 years ago it was not, like, it was just the opposite. But these are topics that the industry as a whole, all of the professionals have changed their mind, and now we universally agree on something that was not the case 10, 20, 30 years ago. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. It's going to be interesting. I think what we see is there's a lot of very serious, sometimes professional or very experienced shooters, maybe who even have a background in military or law enforcement, who have been doing this for a while. And they first learned to shoot 10, 20, 30 years ago when a lot of these things were different. What was being taught by instructors then is different than what is being taught now. Sometimes, you just learn from an instructor who's also 20, 30 years behind. And so even though maybe some of the best practices are already changing, you're being taught by the old guard. And so we're going to talk about some of those things and hopefully clarify some of these best practices and what is believed to be today by the industry at large, the best practice in 5 categories. All right, looks like we got some comments here. Welcome, everyone who's with us. Let's see, Hopper, Bryant, Chrissy, Brett, Ben, some guy named Matthew. Okay, we're here, so thank you to everyone who's live with us, both via Facebook and YouTube. All right, Matthew, should we rock this thing?
do it.
Okay, I got to remind myself what episode number. 432? Yeah. Okay, here we go. This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, episode 432. Welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network. I am your host today, Jacob Paulson, and I am joined by co-host Matthew Marister.
Happy to be here with you again, Jacob, while Riley's out on his vacation. So
that's right. Matthew is wearing a hat from Aguila Ammunition. Is that how you say it? I've always said Aguila.
Sure.
Aguila?
Sure. I mean,
I don't know.
You speak Portuguese, so you have.
Oh, in Portuguese it would be, yeah, that's a different game. But then you ask the guys, how do you say canic or whatever, and they say it's just canic. Here in America we say canic.
Yeah, there's 17 different ways to say it, and they're all right.
That's right. So anyway, we're excited to be here today for episode number 432. That's a lot of episodes. We've only put out one episode this week and last week, so if you're wondering if you're missing something, you're not. We're just a little bit slower right now while Riley's out on vacation. We should be back to normal next week. Today's topic, 5 things the gun industry has changed its mind about. We're going to be discussing 5 very specific best practices or techniques or tactics, those kinds of things, specifically that are not taught today, or not. We don't feel the same way about them today as an industry as we did 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago. Obviously, best practices change in any industry, and this is certainly one of those as well. And depending on how long ago you learned to shoot, or who taught you, and how long ago they had learned to shoot, you may have learned some things that are frankly today outdated, that we've just all moved on and feel differently about it. So we're excited to discuss that. But before we get to that, let's talk about our sponsors. So our sponsors. I'm going to start with our dry fire kit. So for those who don't know, a little while ago, I don't know, maybe not a year ago, less than a year ago, we decided to put together a product bundle for sale on concealedcarry.com. You can find it at concealedcarry.com/dry fire kit. This kit of products, this product bundle, if you were to buy each of the 4 products independently, separately, the retail value is $92.97. But we discount it as part of this bundle. So when you buy these things together, you don't pay the $92.97. Instead, you only pay. I'm looking it up. I actually can't remember.
$74.99.
There you go, $74.99. So $74.99. So that's it's a good savings. It's not quite $15. No, it is. It's more than $15. What am I thinking? It's not quite $25. It's good savings. I don't do math, guys. But instead of being $93, it's $75. You can figure out the difference, and you get 4 products as part of that deal. So go to concealedcarry.com/dry fire kit. So Matthew, the 4 products in here, we have the Dry Fire Primer book from Annette Evans. Mm-hmm. We have a laser cartridge, like laser ammo bullet thingy. We have Barrel Block, and we have a 1-month subscription to LASR X. So what do you think about the kit?
Awesome. I mean, for somebody who's brand new, who has never done dry fire, and it's kind of a new thing, it definitely gives you everything that you need to kind of get started. And if you haven't done dry fire, if you shoot a lot but you just don't do dry fire and you don't see the benefit in it, the book is good. It's a good primer. Obviously, that's what it says, primer, but it's a good introduction into why dry fire is so critically important to maintaining skills and developing those fundamentals.
And it includes drills that you can run, and some actual techniques and stuff. It's good. And Absolutely. Having a laser cartridge means that you can take your real gun and you can do some training with it. And for dry fire, where you're not going to use that laser cartridge, the Barrel Block is a must-have tool to ensure safety and to increase realism by using the mag blocks that come with it. So and then a month subscription to LASR, that's 30 days that you can try that software and decide whether or not it's enhancing your dry fire or not. Go save today. Go get the dry fire kit for $74.99. Guardian Nation members save an additional 10% off. Our second sponsor today is something completely free. And that something free is a feature we're going to talk about that's built into the Concealed Carry Gun Tools app. Our app, which has been downloaded some bazillions of times or something, is very, very common and popular. If you just go to Google Play or the Apple App Store and search Concealed Carry, it'll be in the top 3 results. The full name of the app is Concealed Carry Gun Tools, and you can just look for our logo if you're trying to identify it quickly. But within the app, there's bazillions of features. Not really. There's probably like 20 or something. But one that doesn't get a lot of attention came up recently in a class I was teaching. Here in Colorado, where I am, Matthew, I don't know about Ohio, but in Colorado, when your permit expires or when it's about to expire, you do not get any sort of notification or renewal notice from the state or county. You're completely on your own to pay attention to the expiration date. Is that the case in Ohio?
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah, so that's pretty lame-o. And so it seems, I'd say maybe 1 in every 25 students of mine is a renewal student these days. And a large percentage of them have expired. And they just weren't paying attention to the expiration date. Now they're expired and they got to start over from scratch. So in the Concealed Carry Gun Tools app, once you set up your free user account, so the app is free, setting up a user account is free, you can go into your profile and you can put in an expiration date. You can do this for however many permits you have. In my case, I have like 6 permits. So I put in the expiration date for all of them. And the app will notify you and remind you to renew your permit at 120, 90, 60, and 30 days out from that expiration date. So at least for us here in Colorado and for you guys in Ohio, that might be the only way you're going to get reminded to renew your permit. So please download the Concealed Carry Gun Tools app. And that is just one of many features you can take advantage of in that free tool that you should have on your phone. concealedcarry.com/app will take you to a page where you can get more information about it. And I would encourage you to get that sucker downloaded.
Right on.
All right. Yepper. All right. Now let's get to the fun topic. 5 things the gun industry has changed its mind about. Matthew, I'm going to let you pick one of our 5 and jump into it, dude. Where should we start?
All right. Well, I think it's good to preface this and say there's going to be people that are listening that disagree, and that's great, right? Like, we're not an echo chamber here. We're not dogmatic in everything that we do and firearms related. So if you disagree, great. We'd love to hear comments and things like that. But, we wanted to look at kind of best practice, like you said, best practice things that over time we've kind of said, hey, it might work, but this works better. Some of these things might be, we've completely shifted 180 degrees and we no longer do anything. So we're going to start. I'll start.
Hold on. I'm gonna, as long as we're doing disclaimers, I'm glad you did this, because I think there's one other thing worth saying. Like, everything you said is true, right? Like, if you would disagree, that's fine. However, please note, these 5 topics we're discussing today, these are not debated topics as an industry. Like, if you don't agree, I assure you, you're a minority. So I just want to make sure that we're clear that these 5 things we're going to talk in today's episode, and in the future we might get into more debatable topics, but today these 5 we're going to discuss, all of the professionals, the top players in the game, agree on this. So if you disagree with these 5, I promise you, you are a minority. Now, you're allowed to disagree, and the crowd is sometimes wrong, right? And all that stuff. But I just wanted to be clear that these are not highly debated topics in which me and Matthew are taking a stand. Like, these are industry standards today that weren't previously. All right, Matthew,
Sure.
Go for it.
All right. So I'll start off with something, I guess it's kind of one of my on this list, this is my biggest pet peeve. The ideology, or the idea that concealed carriers or self-defense shooters or people that carry firearms, the intent is to kill. So if you've heard shoot to kill, or the sheriff's deputy that I spoke with told me, if you shoot them, make sure they're dead, or cops shoot to kill. This whole idea that the end state of every self-defense shooting is the death of the attacker, and that's just couldn't be further from the truth. And it sometimes in concealed carry classes, and I'm sure you get this too, Jacob. When we're presenting this way to look at self-defense, you have somebody to say that, well, it's just nuance. It's really the same thing. Shooting to kill or shooting to stop the threat, they're really the same thing. It's just a different word. And I can't disagree more. Like, they're just so diametrically opposed concepts that I find it hard to see how they even relate. And so certainly there's times where self-defense shootings, the attacker dies, but that's not our end state goal. Our end state goal is to stop that threat from carrying out whatever threat they're trying to impose on somebody who's the innocent person, ourselves or somebody else. And when that threat is no longer a deadly threat, we don't have the legal or moral justification to continue to use deadly force until they die. And I think it's also goes into your mindset as well, right? Like, if you have the idea shoot to kill, and that's what is in your mind, I think that it's going to get you involved in situations where you use excessive force, or you might use force that isn't necessary to stop the threat. So I would hate for somebody to get into a court and try to defend themselves when they say, you shoot to kill, right? And they say, yeah, that's what I was taught. And that's just a hard defense because it's sort of premeditated, right? So that's my pet peeve one, so I picked it first.
Yeah, I know that our whole company has very strong feelings about this, because we see way too many comments on our website or on social media that suggest people either straight up were taught this wrong, or they don't get it. And so I think there's 2 versions of that. But regardless, whether you just don't quite get it or you were taught incorrectly, like you get it and you're just wrong, either way, it both sources back to this phrase that's been used in the gun industry, or I should really say was used, and I think it's been pretty dang phased out by now. This idea that, shoot to kill. And we run into it all the time still. We will run into officers, people, law enforcement, or civilians who were in law enforcement, or people who took a class from a guy who learned to shoot 30 years ago or whatever. And they all talk about that very thing. They talk about, shoot to kill. Well, that's what I was taught. So I guess I'll reiterate what you said, maybe using different words in case we're being unclear. There's two sides of this coin. One side is this idea that just straight up the objective is to put someone in the ground. That's what we're trying to do, is end the life, and that's the objective. And in every possible way, that's bad. Ethically, it's wrong. Morally, it's wrong. Legally, that's called murder. If you set out with the objective to take a life, that's murder. It's premeditated murder. It's crazy bad in every way. So that's completely unacceptable. Tactically, it's also foolish. Frankly, if I exhaust more resources than are necessary to stop the threat because I think that the person needs to die, then I am lowering the resources I might need to deal with the second threat or an additional threat. So it's tactically, morally, ethically, and legally wrong. Now, the people who, to your point, Matthew, they see it as just a nuance. It's just words. They say, well, what's the opposite options? Shoot to wound? And that's what I get a lot of the times when I try and explain this to people. I'm like, no, we don't shoot to kill. They say, well, what are you going to do? Hit them in the legs? And to them, it's binary. There's only two options. Well, option one is kill the person, and option two is injure the person. And they don't understand that the words we're using suggest an intent. And they also lead to a mindset and tactics. And when the intent is to kill, that's a problem. So no, we don't shoot to injure. We shoot to stop the threat. And stopping the threat tends to be the same actions that one used to kill someone. The difference is restraint, right? When we shoot to stop a threat, we stop shooting when the threat has stopped. And when we shoot to kill, we stop shooting when the threat is dead and deceased. And that's the variance there. So the objective has to be to shoot to stop the threat, because that's tactically, morally, and legally the best thing you can do. And so, yes, what's changed in the gun industry is we stopped using this horrible phrase that either conveyed the wrong idea or it conveyed exactly what we meant. We were just saying something really stupid and foolish. So that's what's changed, is that we're doing a better job of eliminating that from our vocabulary and instead replacing it with shoot to stop the threat. And that vocabulary both communicates accurately what the objective is, and it eliminates any potential idea that you should be doing something that's ethically, morally, and tactically and legally wrong. So yes, good one, Matthew.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
right.
Actually, before we move, Keith on YouTube, he's watching. Hey, Keith, he says, I was taught dead men tell no tales. The aggressor has more legal rights than the victim. So yeah. I know you wrote an article about this, Jacob.
Yeah, I've been taught this too, Keith. Like, you are not alone. So many of us have been told, well, if you shoot them, then they can't talk, and dead men can't sue you, and all this kind of stuff. It's crazy, not true. And so let's break this down in a couple of different ways that you need to understand. So number one, dead people sue people all the time. In fact, dead people are more likely to sue people than living people. The estate of a dead person, right, their family or their trustee or whoever feels wronged by the fact that this person is dead now, can and often do sue people. Ask O.J. Simpson; he can tell you all about it. His dead wife sued him to death, in a serious way. He lost that trial. He's out millions of dollars, right? So dead men do very much so sue. As to evidence, evidence is abundant, whether or not a person can make a statement or not. Forensic evidence is pretty impressive, and oftentimes there's witnesses as well. So if you're really concerned about the dead person, your attacker, the BG, making statements, then you must be really concerned that your conduct is unlawful. Because otherwise, it's, what's worst case scenario? They could make up some lies, but the evidence, if your conduct was legal, was lawful, should be in your favor. And here's the most important thing you need to understand. When someone is dead, the criminal charges you're facing are charges that, if you lose the case, will land you in prison for the rest of your life. If the person survives, the potential charges you face then are the types of charges that maybe have a maximum, sentence of 10 years or 15 years or something significantly not as bad. So I'd much rather my attacker survive. Both, there's the whole moral and ethical and sleep at night psychological thing. But if for no other practical reason, then I can't be charged with killing someone. I don't ever have to worry about criminal charges of death. I don't ever have to worry about a wrongful death lawsuit after the fact. I don't ever have to worry about the estate suing me, right? It's the person didn't die. Therefore, all of those criminal charges can't be brought against me. And that's super preferable. Without any question, the advantage I gain by the person surviving, should they survive, I really am not focused on their survival. I'm focused on stopping the threat. But the advantages I gain, should they survive, far outweigh the potential, in my opinion, very small advantage of they can't make a statement. They can't tell any tales. So that's where I'm at on that one.
Yeah, I can't add anything.
I got one last thing here, just because we have another comment before we move on. Diane says, "But when you use hollow point ammo, doesn't that look like you were trying to kill to the jury?" And the answer is, Diane, that's another one we could put on our list. We could make that the sixth thing of this episode that has definitely changed over the last decades of time. When hollow point ammunition first came to play, there were some arguments that were brought up in court cases that suggested, to some degree, that hollow points may show premeditated, murder intention kind of stuff. That's not the case today. No way. Any prosecutor who attempted to make such an argument would be destroyed by any half-decent defense attorney who brings any sort of expert witness to trial. Hollow points are the accepted ammunition of choice for all levels of law enforcement and for all civilian paranoid people like us, countrywide without exception. And the thing you need to understand is that hollow points are not only more effective at stopping threats, they're also safer. They are less likely to penetrate through a target and hit some innocent person beyond. So without question, hollow points are the accepted safest and most effective ammunition in a self-defense encounter today. And it's been years, like probably a decade since I'm confident it's been at least a decade since any prosecutor in any trial anywhere ever attempted to use the suggestion that hollow points showed some sort of malice on the part of the defendant. And if they did, like I said, it would be destroyed by any half-competent defense attorney. So no, I don't think that's a viable concern.
Yeah, there was actually a study that was done in New York with police officers and police-involved shootings. And there were, I think it was in the late 80s, early 90s, where a high number of innocent people were shot by police officers, but they were bullets that had passed through a suspect that they were shooting, and officers had been shot before and through friendly fire, but it was actually rounds that were passing through the attacker. So there's ample evidence that shows that full metal jacket is not the ideal round to use in self-defense, where there's people potentially behind targets and things. And I think some of this, that adage that hollow points are somehow very dangerous or exceptionally dangerous, is why you see some states banning hollow point ammunition for civilians, which is counterintuitive to safety. I think it plays on that fear that somehow these rounds are, more dangerous than full metal jacket, which it's probably opposite.
Yeah. Hollow points were disallowed by United Nations in a I think it was the Geneva Convention many years ago. And I think that and understanding it's a completely different context. We're talking about battlefields in wartime versus on the streets in the city, here. But I think that led to a lot of these misunderstandings and myths and things that kind of created this environment where some people believed or still believe that hollow points, are more dangerous or more likely to kill people or whatever. And I understand it's a different context, and we've come a long way in 60 years is really important. All right, I think the next then natural one on our list of our 5 things, Matthew, is caliber. And This is probably the one we're most likely to get hate mail from. So we'll do our best here. But 9mm is the ammunition of choice in today's gun industry. I think you're going to have a really hard time, very difficult time, finding any top tier firearm professional who doesn't carry 9mm. I don't know this. I'm making this up, so I don't actually have the core statistics, but I suspect that 9mm has today so much dominance in the marketplace in terms of market share that it probably has more market share than all other handgun calibers combined times 3. I suspect that more than 90% of handguns being sold today on the market are 9mm. Again, I don't know that. That's just like Jacob's perception of the marketplace. But 9mm is huge. It's a real big deal. And that definitely has changed. I think if you talk to people who have been shooting for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, they were trained up in an environment, whether they're law enforcement, military, or civilian, non-LEO civilian. People were trained in an environment where the 45 was king. And the 40 was an acceptable, next step down if you needed increased capacity. But the 9mm was an unacceptably underpowered round. And that was the environment that people who learned to shoot 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that's the environment they were brought up in. And so that's not how we feel today. Matthew, what are your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, it is. And like you said, this is something that some people get really wrapped around, picking out a specific caliber. If you talk to trauma surgeons, or if you read articles written by trauma surgeons who deal with gunshot wounds, oftentimes they can't even tell what caliber it is when they just observe the hole until they find fragments. And we're talking about handgun. We're not comparing handgun ammunition to rifle, right? Well, handgun ammunition is inherently traveling at a low enough speed where it's not as devastating, obviously, as rifle rounds. So the difference between the hole in the 45 and a 9mm are so inconsequential that you really don't have to worry about. We're not trying to put big holes in people. We're trying to get consistent penetration into the vital organs that end up shutting down this person's attack. So as long as you have ammunition that consistently is traveling fast enough where it can consistently penetrate, it consistently opens up, and it does this consistently, then your ammunition that you're using is great, right? It doesn't matter if it's 9mm or 45 or what it is. I think what switched it for me, or what was kind of the turning point for me, was that I saw these studies that showed, that as long as it's penetrating, you have the same hits. Greg Elfritz does same effectiveness of the round. Greg Elfritz does a great job in an article comparing the number of rounds it takes to stop an attacker, and he goes through a bunch of different cases and a bunch of different calibers. And so he looks at this and says, what are the number of shots that it takes to stop an attacker? Is it effective in stopping them, or did it just slow them down? And so it almost, from 9mm to 45, they were all very equal. 380 was marginal because it didn't penetrate enough. So it oftentimes took a couple more rounds. And then 22, while it did stop attackers, it took an exorbitant amount of rounds to stop the attacker. I don't know the numbers offhand, but I want to say it's like 8 or 10 on average compared to 3 or 4 from 9mm through 45.
Yeah, so his data set was extensive. I
mean,
tons of incidents. Hundreds, maybe thousands even of incidents in his data set.
Yeah, so it boils down to how can you get effective shots on target quickly, and if you can't control a 45 or a 40 as easily as a 9mm, then maybe shooting a 9mm that has a little bit less recoil, you can shoot quicker. Right, your splits are quicker. You're trying to put more rounds on this attacker quickly, and additionally, it goes into the capacity of your firearm. Right, like the larger the ammunition, the less capacity in the same size gun. So all those things kind of pointed me towards, hey, standardize 9mm. You can buy a bunch. I mean, it's a cheap round, right? So you can go and train as much as you can. I know if you're shooting 45, you're probably not training as much as if you were shooting 9mm, unless you have a ton of money, and maybe you do. But so all those little things kind of inched me, or pointed me towards 9mm. And I think that's kind of, not to say if you're shooting 40 or 45 that you're a dinosaur. There's obviously people that do. But I think the concept of nothing is as good as a 45, and anything lower than that is for wimps or something. I think that's kind of been busted.
Yeah, that's been busted. When you and I met, Matthew, you and I were both carrying 40s.
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
And so I was in my concealed carry lifespan, I was born and raised on the 40. So I get it, to that degree. But you mentioned several good points, and I'm going to give kind of an analogy, a metaphor, and then we'll move on. But you mentioned capacity is a key. As an industry, we've determined that having more capacity is more important than having that slight incremental amount of stopping power. We've also determined that ability to shoot accurately and quickly is increased when someone has less recoil. And so 9mm people tend to shoot better at a higher quality. We've determined as an industry that the 9mm costs less. And so people are more likely to train more, get more practice than they are with higher calibers that cost more. And we've also determined that in the last 30 years, bullet technology relative to how good we have gotten at hollow point expansion and penetration has come a long way. Today there's a lot of really high quality, reliable hollow point ammunition that has extremely consistent expansion and penetration. Whereas 30 years ago, that was a lot more hit and miss. So, the way hollow points have improved, and obviously they've improved for all calibers, right? We've made the same progression with 45 caliber hollow points as we have with 9mm hollow points, but having that kind of increased, reliable, consistent penetration and expansion on hollow points, generally speaking, has made what was once a very considered an underpowered round to be more agreeable and more consistent. Here's like my quick metaphor I use to explain this to people. I say, first and foremost, if I have to run over a bad guy in my car, do you think I'm better off running them over with a Cadillac or a Honda Civic? Cadillac's a bigger car. Like, which do you think will be more effective? At the same speed. Let's assume I hit them at the same speed.
Yeah, I don't think it matters, except the Cadillac's going to cost more to fix, right?
but they're both probably going to be relatively similarly effective on the BG I run over, right?
Yep.
And then here's the next thought. What if I go down to a Ford Focus? I got Cadillac or Ford Focus, but if I take the Ford Focus, I can run them over twice instead of once. Which would you choose? Run them over once with the Cadillac or twice with the Ford Focus?
Yeah, it's if you're traveling,
I'd hit them twice with the Ford Focus.
Because if you're traveling, we're talking about speeds, right? On a highway, it doesn't matter. So that's your rifle round. Your pistol caliber might be, that you're coming up to a Black Lives Matter protest rally thing, and they're all surrounding your car, and you're going 5 miles an hour, right? You see this on videos that people run over by cars at 5 miles an hour. Sometimes they die, depending on, but oftentimes they survive. So we're talking about speed and mass versus, a relatively slow speed versus a relatively high speed, and the mass can be lighter, but it produces more damage. So
it might be a silly metaphor to some degree, and I get that, but I think that you got to understand that the incremental difference between someone getting shot with a 45 or 9mm is about the difference between getting hit with a Honda Accord or a Honda Civic. Like, it's that kind of like difference. It's minute. And certainly we do have to talk about velocity, because in addition to bullet diameter and weight, we also have to consider velocity. But when we're talking about handgun calibers, the variance in that group of like 9mm, 40, and 45 is so minute that it yes, I get it. It is 9mm is less powerful. No question about it. It is less diameter, it is less weight. But if I increase my ammo capacity by 30, 40%, I'd say that's arguably worth it. And that's what the industry has decided. So yes, the industry could be wrong. The crowd could be wrong. 10mm is awesome, and I love it too. And I own a 45 and a 40 and stuff. But as an industry, you need to understand that today, the accepted best caliber for self-defense is the 9mm. That's what the crowd, the group, the industry has decided. And those are the reasons that Matthew and I are presenting that are the most commonly referred to justify that shift. Okay, someone does mention here in the comments, and I think this is worth saying out loud, that Lucky Gunner ballistics data is good to review. So we'll try and remember to put that link in the show notes, but Lucky Gunner has done some amazing ballistics tests, and we will try and share that link to all their data in the show notes if you're interested in reading that. All right, Matthew, what's next?
All right, I'm going to pick an easy one. We'll go with stance. This is pretty easy. Back in the day, you had two choices, right? You had the isosceles, which is kind of squared up to the target, right? Your arms extended, kind of making a triangle, isosceles triangle with your upper body. And you had the weaver stance, which is you're kind of bladed to the target on a kind of an oblique, right? And you're kind of pushing out with your dominant hand and kind of pulling back with your non-dominant hand. And those were the two stances, right? That's how you would shoot. And through analysis, we have so many videos of shootings, right? Like how police and civilians and even some like CQB type military training and things like that, where we know how the body reacts to a threat, a close quarters threat, right? Especially with handguns. We know how the body naturally responds to that threat. And time again, you see the body squaring up, aligning themselves to the threat and addressing the threat head on rather than sideways. Now, certainly there are some martial arts and you know, you are is kind of like a weaver stance, but shooting wise, when you use the firearm, typically you see the natural point of aim is to, or natural tendency is to face up square to the threat. So the weaver stance has sort of gone away because it was actually designed for competition use. It was never designed as a self-defense, natural, instinctive stance. And so for me, when I'm teaching stance, I really don't care how their feet are, because truthfully, if you're walking, if you're running, if you're sitting, if you're whatever it might be, it doesn't really matter. Now, obviously, if you can get a good stance, feet shoulder width apart, right? Weight evenly distributed, all that stuff, that's great if you have that ability. But in a self-defense encounter, you're probably not going to be concerned about getting feet shoulder width apart. Is it okay if my right foot is back behind my left foot? It doesn't matter, as long as you have that natural point of aim and that alignment of your upper body with the gun. You're much more likely to be able to shoot instinctively and quickly than concerned about getting your feet in a position. So I think stance is one of those where some, you know, hey, this is the weaver, we'll teach the weaver. If you want to use that, you'll teach isosceles. But truthfully, stance is more thought of as a platform. It's just how are you applying those fundamentals. It's not so much you have to stand a certain way.
Yeah, I think, you know, isosceles is maybe kind of the earliest stance that we were seeing shooters use way before I was around in the game. And Jeff Cooper and others really popularized the, you know, what I would call the traditional weaver stance early, you know, decades ago now, but, you know, relatively in recent history. And then there's kind of became this drift, this shift back toward isosceles as we learn more about physiology and things like that. And to your point today, I think that we continue to see the shift even away from dogmatic stances, from the idea that there's only one correct way to stand, because we've accepted that a, you know, static stance where I stand in a very specific way and I shoot a very static target is not really applicable, broadly speaking, in defensive encounters. So I think that what we definitely could say is over the last 10, 20, 30 years, we've seen a shift away from weaver toward isosceles. And I think in the last 2 to 3 years, we're seeing a shift away from any dogmatic stance at all and more toward principle-based shooting, with the core principles that are pretty universally accepted being square up your chest and extend both arms out straight from chest straight out to target, and kind of an emphasis on balance. And generally a balance means the feet are about shoulder width apart, the knees are probably slightly bent. Whether or not that means that the feet are one's in front of the other, you know, directly, or is kind of to the side but slightly in front, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. We've kind of gotten away from feeling that you have to be very dogmatic about the way you stand, and more principled around the idea that you just need to have balance. And that generally means that your knees are slightly bent, your weight is slightly forward on the balls of your feet, and that your feet are probably about shoulder width apart, regardless of where they're placed. And that seems to kind of be what we've decided as an industry. Do you think that's a fair summary, Matthew?
Yeah, absolutely. You always do a good job of summarizing stuff. So I'm all over the place, and you kind of
No,
summarize. So
I let you hit on all the finer detail. Very good. Let's. I think the natural segue from stance is grip. Grip has changed dramatically. In fact, in my classes, when I teach about grip, it's one of the most common things my students will later say that they really enjoyed about the class. A common question I'll ask in a class is, what is something you learned today or that you were reminded of today that you already knew that really was impactful for you, that you'll definitely remember it tomorrow and you're so glad I covered that? And one of the more common things people say is how to grip a gun. And it's always remarkable to me because I grew up in the current gun gripping world, right? I mean, I started carrying a gun in 2004. And in the last, decade or so, it's been pretty universally accepted that you shouldn't be teacupping your gun. But if you've been around guns for a long time, if you learned to shoot in the 70s or 80s or 90s, or maybe you learned more recently, but the guy who taught you or the gal who taught you, they learned in the 70s or 80s and they never changed anything. You might have really been taught to teacup the gun, and by doing so, maybe you're kind of helping hold up the weight of the gun, and it's easier then to balance and shoot and stuff. And so that's something that I think for a decent amount of time now we've been away from that. It's been a long time since I've had anyone try to argue the current modern firearm grip as being less effective than some past thing people used to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen people come through the class with the teacup, where they're holding the bottom of the gun, the bottom of the grip, or they're gripping their wrist, and just understanding, and not only just how you grip the gun, but how tight you grip the gun. There's a portion of people that still teach like grip the gun really lightly. You don't want to over grip it. Then there's those on the other side that grip the gun very, very strongly. For me, I'm sort of in the boat of grip it as strong as you can without to the point squeezing so tight that you start to shake. So that's kind of where I am with that.
Yeah. So this kind of modern, both hands high on grip. Applying relatively strong pressure with both hands. And again, some debate over, how much this hand, that stuff. I'm not going to get into that, but the idea that we've moved away from teacupping the thing, that's pretty consistently recognized as a shift we've all made pretty universally.
Sure.
All right, Matthew, what's our last one here?
Our last one is 1911s. 1911s. We saved the most controversial to last.
Okay, I'll let you start.
Okay, cool. All right, so 1911s. Obviously, one of the most recognized and most used firearms throughout time, right? And I think that we've seen a shift from single action 1911s as far as self-defense guns, right, to striker fired guns. And certainly not everybody has shifted to a striker fire gun. There's plenty of people that still carry 1911s for self-defense. Certainly they're used in competition shooting because they are so tunable and very a very nice shooting gun. But I think for self-defense, people have gone away from the single action semi-automatics, basically because it has to be carried with the hammer back and safety on. And I think a lot of people are realizing that, hey, I don't really necessarily might not need a safety on my self-defense firearm, right? And so now if I have a single action gun, I have to have a safety, right? A manual external safety. And plus I don't want to say that they are less reliable, because there's certainly 1911s that are extremely reliable. I think that it takes more expertise to run a 1911 than it does a Glock or a Smith & Wesson or any striker fire gun, fill in the blank, just because they are the ratio of the springs and how you must maintain it and what you must oil and all those things are very They're not like, I don't want to say entry level, but they require a little bit of expertise and experience with the gun. So I don't want to say that nobody carries single action semi-automatics for self-defense, but we're seeing, and I'll just tell you from seeing people bring guns through my classes, it's probably 85% striker fired semi-automatic guns coming through. And the other bigger portion would be revolvers. And then probably if you broke it down, then it would be single action semi-automatics.
Yeah, it's been a weird shift. And my second handgun I ever purchased was a 1911. Hand on heart, John Moses Browning. We appreciate the amazing innovation from the best gun designer ever on planet Earth. And love the 1911 to that end. And it clearly has been through every environment for which a gun could be through it, and is a proven, awesome, tested tool, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, Matthew, to your point, I would reiterate what you said and maybe add a few things. It's no longer the firearm that this industry has accepted as the best tool for the job by any measure. I'd say 1911s are something I see in my range shooting classes in 1 out of every 100 shooters. It's not common. Does it require greater amount of skill to maintain and shoot properly? There's something to that. I mean, it's much easier to shoot accurately. Single action only guns are hard. It's a really light, short, crisp trigger, right? So everyone loves the feeling of shooting a 1911 because it's easier to be accurate. However, that comes with things. That tends to come with decreased ammo capacity. It tends to come with a heavier gun that's a full metal frame versus something that's polymer and arguably more comfortable and easier to carry. It tends to come with an external safety, which is an extra thing that has to be trained and practiced to activate and deactivate accordingly and properly. It's a huge concern for me when a student shows up on my range with a 1911, because I got to not only make sure that they have good muzzle discipline and trigger finger discipline, but I also have to make sure that they have proper safety discipline, that they're activating the safety every time they finish shooting before they go to the holster, and that they obviously deactivate it when they, as part of their draw stroke, at the appropriate time in that presentation. So it's a thing. I love my 1911, love it, love shooting my 1911. Oh my goodness, it's just so beautiful and wonderful. But as an industry, we've moved away from 1911s. Law enforcement has moved away from 1911s. The military, my goodness, talk about a shift. I mean, you could go back to 60 something, and that was the issue for all departments of the military. And today it is the standard issue. So I could be wrong, but I don't think it's the standard issue for any military departments. I'm fairly confident that's the case. And for people who want the nice, smooth single action trigger, today we have the DASA, category of guns, double action, single action, where you get that double action on the first trigger squeeze, and then you have follow-up shots that are single action. The Beretta 92 and the some of the all the other I have a SIG that's a DASA gun that I really love, my 229 and all the 226 and all those in that series. So yes, as an industry, as much as we love and respect and still cherish warmly the 1911, we've moved away from it for defensive concealed carry use, without question.
Yeah, agree.
Yep. Again, props to John Moses Browning. All right, guys, that brings us to the end of this discussion. 5 things that as an industry we've changed our mind about over the last 10, 20, 30, 40, or 50 years, depending on which of those topics we're discussing. There are definitely other things that we see that the industry is changing its mind about. Some of those are a little bit more subtle. Some of them very significant. Some of them are still, I would say, on their way out, or still a little bit debated. So maybe if this is something you enjoyed, if you'd like this episode, email us or leave us a review on iTunes or somewhere and tell us that you really like this episode and you'd like to see us discuss more things that have changed or that are changing, or even potentially we could do an episode on things we think will change in the next 5 to 10 years. So let us know if that's something you'd like to hear more of. A reminder, please, if you haven't already, subscribe to this podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the audio feed, because we have episodes we release only in the audio feed. So go to iTunes or Google Play, or download any podcast app, Spotify, iTunes, or not iTunes, iHeartRadio or TuneIn, or any other generic podcast app to your mobile device, and search for Concealed Carry, and you will find our podcast and subscribe there, and make sure you check all the new episodes we publish to the audio feed. That's the best place to make sure you're getting every episode that's been released. I encourage you to do that. If you haven't already, please consider supporting us by shopping first at concealedcarry.com. We understand that we sell a lot of products. We have 600 to 700 products. We may not be the cheapest on all of them, and if we're not the cheapest, we don't deserve your business. So check us, please, before you purchase anywhere else. And if we earn your business because we have the best deal and the best product, we certainly appreciate it. That's the best way you can support our podcast. If you want to be a member of the best, fastest growing defensive-minded gun tribe in America, please join Guardian Nation at guardiannation.com. That's the other best way you can support what we do here and make sure we keep pumping out content like this. Matthew, last thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to address one comment. Antonio, he called me out and he said, how about using the term rioters as a threat rather than BLM when I was talking about driving through protests and things.
Sure.
I make the distinction. I wasn't trying to insinuate or recommend driving through anybody who's protesting or peacefully assembling, no matter what group they are. It doesn't matter if we like the group, we don't like them. I wasn't encouraging that, so I want to make the distinction. The reason why I use that is that we have a lot of videos that are popping up now of this happening, and that just popped in my mind as far as that. But good call out. Wasn't talking about running over anybody in a specific group, but if you are in a riot where people are threatening your life or the life of the people in your vehicle, that was what I was referring to. So thanks for calling that out, Antonio. I'm glad we made that distinction.
Yep. Thanks for clarifying, Matthew. Here, we don't care what you want to label the group or individual threat. What matters is if that's an imminent deadly threat to an innocent party, then you have the right to use proportional, therefore deadly, force in defense of that innocent party. And that's the key. That's the takeaway there, regardless of what we label the group or individual who's posing that threat. Thank you, Matthew. All right, guys, thank you for being with us for another episode 432. Remember to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care, everyone. Thank you to all of you who have been participating live with us here on Facebook and on YouTube. We appreciate your participation and your comments. Today, we had several really good comments that we were able to work into the topic matter, the show content. So we really appreciate all of those comments, and even those that we don't mention audibly. We do appreciate them, and we try to respond to them where possible, where appropriate. And we appreciate those of you who participate with us live. Again, sorry for last week and this week. We know we've been off our game and off our schedule a little bit, but we are going to resume, hopefully, everything like normal next week with Shop Talk live on Mondays at noon Mountain Time and the podcast live on Tuesdays and Thursdays at noon Mountain Time. Matthew, do we have a giveaway we need to do?
Yeah, because we didn't pick it from last week.
Oh, my bad. Okay. I should have done that while we were still recording. Maybe I'll try and pipe this audio in. So here we go. Okay, let's go ahead and do our weekly giveaway before we sign off. So Matthew, what are we giving away this week?
We are giving away a tactical pen, concealed carry tactical pen.
Oh, that's ironic. I'm fiddling with one. Okay, so the concealed carry tactical pen. That's this thing right here. We're giving that away this week.
Yep.
For those of you who want to know how to enter the giveaway, don't forget that you just got to go to concealedcarry.com/podcast prize. And you enter there. You have to enter every week. Every week is a different product being given away. So just remember, every week. So basically from Tuesday through Monday is the entry period each week. And you do not have to be live or whatever to win. All you got to do is fill out the form, and we pick a winner at random, and we contact that person via email to make arrangements to ship them their prize. So concealedcarry.com/podcast prize. All right, Matthew, who's our winner?
Winner is Mr. Carlos, and your last name starts with an S.
Carlos S.
Yeah, and you have an AOL email address.
And we promise not to make fun of you for having an AOL email address. AOL supplied me with free targets for for a good decade of my life.
Those DVD CDs.
Yeah, those CDs would show up in the mail, be like, sweet, more targets. I wish they would still do that. All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us today. Thank you for participating in our giveaways as well. All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and sign off. Matthew, thank you again. Thanks, everyone, for being here. We'll see you with Shop Talk on Monday at noon Mountain Time. Thanks, everyone.